Hi, Tim Spann here, Principal Developer Advocate at Cloudera. My talk today for Pulsar Summit is using Apache NiFi with Apache Pulsar for fast data on-ramp. You could check out my articles at datamotion.dev and at Medium. I'm going to show you how NiFi and Pulsar together are super friends with Flink and Spark and some other Iceberg and some other things out there. But first, NiFi is great for all use cases, whether it's slow data, batch, micro batch streaming, events, logs, CDC, grabbing data from Pulsar, putting it into Pulsar, grabbing data from Kafka into Pulsar. It's a nice way to very easily drag and drop between different environments very easily, not a lot of heavy lifting. You're writing some scripts, maybe a little SQL, occasionally some Python. If you want to write your own custom components, some Java, not too heavyweight. And with NiFi support of a registry, you do a full industrialized flow development lifecycle, just like you do with any software product. Cloudera has a version of this available to run in the cloud, on-premise, and all the way out to the edge in smaller bite-sized versions of NiFi called NiFi that either run on top of a small amount of Java or it's even tinier C++. And that'll let you acquire stuff from lots of different resources, lots of different data types, and then do some processing on them, transformation, encryption, routing, lots of cool stuff there. And at the end, deliver it to some destination with full guaranteed delivery and really no problems there. So it doesn't matter where your data comes from. It could come from the cloud, could be born on premise, edge device, third-party data, wherever it comes from. You got to ingest it, whether that's a push or a pull, active or passive. NiFi lets you easily do both, set up gateway endpoints as secure as you need them to be, so you can get data sources in, whether someone's pushing them, you're pulling them, FTP, SFTP, HTTP, lots of acronyms. We get the data in, route it, filter it. Sometimes you don't need that data. Enrich it, enhance it with lookups and such. Transform it maybe from comma separated value into JSON or Avro, or write to something like Iceberg or Parquet. Connect it to whatever connectors you need out there. Deliver it to any destination. This could be Pulsar on premise to Pulsar in the cloud, Kafka on premise to Kafka in the cloud, or Kafka to Pulsar, or Pulsar to Kafka, or multiplexed. I pull something in from JMS, send it to Pulsar, Kafka, Iceberg, Kudu, HBase, text file, an S3, an ADLS2, as many as you could think of. And that includes things like Snowflake and Delta Lake and ScyllaDB and Cassandra and any data source you come across. They have a JDBC or they have a REST endpoint. We could probably get to them. Over 400 different processors out there. What's cool about NiFi? Consume all the data. It's very scalable. Add more node scales out. I'll show you how we can do that on top of Kubernetes to very easily scale out each of these flows, handle real-time streaming data, collect, curate, analyze it, do it at any scale. Again, so you could drop it into whatever source you might need for. So regardless of what those sources of data is, get them in, enrich them, apply schemas, filter them, all with back pressure, full data provenance, this lineage auditing data, metadata about everything that happens within your flow. So you're never lost for where your data might have gone to, how it works, what happened to it, how's it processed. And thanks to our friends at Stream Native and David Kurmgard, there is a awesome Pulsar processor that gets, enhanced pretty frequently and is available for the latest version of NiFi and a number of older ones. This lets you connect to, consume, and publish out data to Pulsar pretty easily. Again, consume it asynchronously, get these topics when events happen, push new things out. Here we could just filter them, send them to another topic. Here, if that succeeds, I put in a database. Pretty straightforward. You don't have to set up too much parameters. There's a couple of different options in there, but generally you connect a record, maybe JSON, put another JSON, maybe it has a schema, connect to your Pulsar client, which can be secured by OAuth or other means. I'm running in Docker, so I don't have to worry about that. Pretty straightforward. So I have the ability to get to Pulsar. What's nice is I might not want to have to install a cluster somewhere or have to manage that. That's a lot of extra work. So instead I could go to the public cloud and use Cloudera DataFlow, which will give me everything I need to build, deploy, run, and scale NiFi without the heavy lifting. Gives me a custom designer, gives me a flow catalog for everything that I've imported and stored there, which is great. I could just go to this and deploy whatever version, have it run, stop it when I'm done, upgrade it very easily. Great way to do pushing things cloud natively. Now, to make things easier, you might be like, well, it's a very simple thing I'm doing. I may be always just grabbing something from Kafka, putting it into Iceberg. Well, that's very common. So Cloudera wrote a number of these. So you press a button, deploy them, set a couple parameters, and you're ready to go. It is a really nice way to do that and very simple. So like I said, whether you write it in our designer, import it into the catalog, use one of these ready flows, Deployment Wizard walks you through everything you need to do. It is a very good guide. You pick what cluster you want to run on, put in a couple parameters, upload a JDBC driver if you need it, fill those out, determine how you want to size things. Do you need scaling? Put in a couple of things that you want to monitor. Maybe you want alerts on them. Maybe you just want them in our monitoring dashboard. A couple of different things you can monitor here. It's pretty much every component in a flow and the overall of the flow. It is a great way to be able to track how much data is coming in different sections, look for data loss, look for slowdowns. Really nice feature here. And then when it's deployed, some of those come through and are very easy to see within our dashboard. You could show as many flows as you want, and I'll log into the cloud and show you that. The really game changer is not having to run a cluster full time for someone to build flows. As opposed to other coding, the way NiFi generally works is you start up a NiFi node or cluster, it provides a web interface, and you use that to design your flows, and then they run right there, which is handy, especially if you're just doing it on a laptop. But in a production environment, it's nice to have a cloud native development tool that can be spun up anywhere, as long as you can securely get in. You test in your own secure sandbox, do whatever you need to, publish a version to the catalog, and version that up and deploy when you're ready. Great way to build and test and not use too many resources, all on top of a powerful Kubernetes environment. And to make it even cooler, you could also develop functions. So you develop them either in that designer, or you could do it on your local workstation, no code, low code with the UI, build a flow that's like a job, has a start and end, grab a file here, push it to Pulsar at the end, pretty straightforward. And then you easily deploy these. We've got a command line DevOps tool. You download your flow and a little bit of configuration, and it gets pushed to your choice of public clouds, whether it's AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, or Google Cloud Functions, and it'll run there just like one of the native services. You don't need to set up any NiFi clusters. This is a great way to do things that look like a function, act like a function. People have asked me for this over the years many times because they say, I have something where, a file comes into S3, and then I want to push it to a data store, or I want to push it into another S3 bucket, or into Pulsar or Kafka or Scylla. And there's a little bit of transformation along the way, but event in, event out. And if the event is damaged or that data is not right, stop, roll the whole thing back, forget about it. This is perfect for that. Really cool. A lot of different use cases here. It could be triggered by something happening. It's a pipeline, something is uploaded, data flows triggered. And we've got a couple of cool image processing things in NiFi. NiFi also has the ability to run some machine learning and deep learning. And there's work to integrate Python in that. So you'll be able to, run a PyTorch, run some of these LLM models out there, NLP, bunch of cool stuff there. Chaining these low code functions together, make complex workflows, something the Pulsar people know about. Have things scheduled to run, when it's cheap to do it or when the resources are available. Use this as a way to have your microservices, have endpoints for your web apps. And with the DataFlow state feature, you can build flows, customize trigger with whatever external services make sense for you, whatever happens. Obviously, NiFi plus Pulsar is the way to go. I've got a couple of cool examples out there with the full source code. One's for capturing NFT data, and the other is for working with travel advisories that come out from the US government. And those are full walkthroughs and the full source code there. And I'm going to run into the demos. So let's get out there. I'm just going to make sure I log into my cloud, make sure I am in my public cloud. I am logged in. This is running on, well, let's see, which public cloud is it on? We'll have to take a look. It doesn't really matter. This is saying this is in Amazon in the East, which is where I live. But this could also have been Azure or something else. Doesn't really matter to us, which is nice. I like being kept away from that. As you see here, we've got a job running in our dashboard, and we could see what's going on with those KPIs that someone selected and the basic system metrics to see how the cores are running. See if there's any alerts, nothing important. And we could take a look at the catalog, see if there's anything we like. I happen to like things that are written by me. That's what I like. And I could see I deployed one. Did I deploy anything recently? This one came out a couple hours ago, and I could see what version it is. I could download a copy if I want to work with it somewhere else, or I create a new draft from that, or do a deploy. I just pick my environment that I want to run on, and you saw those slides. We pick up a couple of parameters and walk through the wizard pretty easily. Can't get much easier than that. But I'd rather show you a designer I have running. Let's see if that's timed out. Maybe we'll just go in through here. And I'll show you my designer. Maybe I'll show you those ready flows first. Remember, I was mentioning those. Me and David are working on a couple for Pulsar here. So if you have use cases you do all the time, let us know. Maybe it's Kafka to Pulsar. Maybe it's Pulsar to Iceberg, Pulsar to S3, or an Airtable to Pulsar. Let us know. And some of these ready flows can be developed because they're really awesome. All you have to do is create a new draft, pick your workspace. You might run multiple, give it a unique name, and then it'll create it. We'll go to the design that I have already, and I'll take a look at mine here. Mine is active because I'm working with it right now, but I could turn that off if I don't need it. Again, save your resources, but come back to it when you're ready. And this is, I can log into this from anywhere. As you can see, I could stop that test session as I want. I could also, as you see here, I've made it available to have inbound connections over a certain port with SSL as long as you have the key. Again, security is pretty solid here. I'm going to run a single runtime of my travel advisories from the REST endpoint. If we take a look here, everything is a parameter, so I could reuse this. You see here, this is from the US State Department, and it is XML. You know, dreaded words anywhere, but, you know, let's start our flow here and have our data coming in. And it has already been converted. And if we look here, we could take a look at this data. It might be too much data. It is now JSON, which is a little easier to work with. So that's a good feature. We'll get out of that. What's nice is we don't lose data when we decide to pause parts of our runtime. I split that out into individual records, easier to work with, and makes the demos look cooler because there's more data. And then I break it down to the smallest components that I need. And then down here, I'm going to update the records, which is just adding a couple extra fields, changing some of the field names. Again, transformation. Let's see if we've got our Pulsar connector set up. It's pretty easy to find Pulsar in this list. We got it in case you don't have data that looks like a record. A record in NiFi is things like comma separated values, JSON, Avro, protobuf, you know, things that have a schema. So let's see if I set all these properties right. I'm going to send JSON out. Let's make sure we've got our Pulsar connection working. It is set up with whatever client authentication we need there. And if we take a look, pretty straightforward. A couple of parameters here based on what you want. I put a message ID in there. You know, whatever makes sense. I could also send it to Kafka. I could also send it to Slack. I've got a Slack group set up here. I'm just going to send one because 13,000 Slack messages is a pain over here. This is the one that just came in, and it's got a link to more details if you're really concerned with what's going on with that travel advisory. They pretty much put them up for anything. You know, if it's raining too much there, then there's a travel advisory. But so what we're going to do is go over to my local NiFi. You can see this is not running in a cloud environment, and that is receiving the data. It's consuming it from that Pulsar cluster, and it just got the data. 68 records came in one chunk. Again, you could break these up as however you want, but we usually batch them when we're moving this fast. And we've got those records. I can query them here. I can convert them into something else. So say when they got here, I wanted to convert them to Avro or a comma separated file or something for influx, Parquet, or back to XML. Hopefully you're not doing that. Parquet is not a bad one to turn it into. Here, then I could put it into a database of your choosing. You know, it's JSON coming in. You know, it could have been Oracle, Microsoft SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, DB2, whatever you're sending it to, you know, or one of the new SQLs. Create the table and you're ready to go. To make it generic, you could look at the metadata that's coming in with these records. And based on that metadata, maybe that's how you get your table. Or you could pull a field out of the data and use that as your table. Whatever makes sense for you. Pretty easy to do this. We've got the lineage here that tells us what happened at each step. And that gives you how long it's been in the lineage, what time it came in, file size, unique ID. Lots of different metadata here. And you can see if any of these changed. A bunch of them did. See 400 records resulting. A lot of data there, and it's still JSON. Pretty easy, but gives you one option there. So that is one flow we have running here, and pretty easy way to send things to Pulsar. Again, as you see in these numbers here, we sent out 1,500 messages. Now, I could publish this as a new flow, and I like how it works. And we get another version here. And I'd probably close my designer if I was really done here, but I'm not. So again, easy to deploy that. It's already stored in the catalog because they have that version. So if we want to see that, we could take a look and see that I just updated this one. And if I want to deploy it, pretty easy just to pick my environment, continue my deploy, give it a unique name, probably better than that one. Pick which version of NiFi you want this to run on. Because this is in Kubernetes, whatever the one you want is. Most likely you want the latest, greatest version, as that's the best. If you need a specific version, you could take a look there. Remember, we could do the inbound connections if you want, and you could add different ports, whether it's TCP, IP, or UDP. Obviously, in the cloud, it's probably safer TCP, IP, and have SSL going on there. You know, that's depend on what you want to do. If you have any custom processors you have, you could drop them in an S3 bucket and we could use those. We don't have any for this. We're just using off the shelf. You only have to, you can reuse all those parameters that someone set up in the designer if they're not going to change. The only ones you need to change are ones that are sensitive. These are things like passwords. These we don't store for you for security purposes, or ones that need a value. Like here, we have to upload a database driver to be able to run this. For this particular one, I think it's Impala driver, and we have that. I guess we can update that while we're here. And we'll just put in the that driver there just so we have it. I guess we should put in our passwords. If I remember them. I'm not going to put the webhook URL in because I don't want to send a million Slack messages. And then we could decide how big we want it. Give you t-shirt sizes here. This is a powerful processor. The amount you could get done in 2 cores and 4 gig is a lot. Most people, when they're running NiFi on their laptop or desktop or in a single node, are only running in a gig or 2. So 4 gigs and a couple of cores is pretty good. And we could have it scale up to 32 nodes if you wanted. Or, you know, you could decide to size it a little bigger. Again, large nodes, a big cluster of those can do some serious processing. If you look here, it gives you a summary of how this deployment's going. And we can add all those different KPIs, any of the named connections. Pretty easy. A couple different metrics for each one. I can put alerts on there. Very easy. I can do ones for individual processors that we use, and we used a bunch. Maybe we could take a look at how much bytes are going into Pulsar. We could put an alert on there if we're not getting enough. You think you should be getting, you know, 100K every 5 minutes, then maybe we should send an alert. And then we could even go down to process groups. We've got 2 of them. We could look at the whole flow, add things like how much data is coming out. We could add things like for the whole system, look at the different utilizations. Again, up to you. Now it's given us all the information we need to deploy. Press that button, we're deploying to this cloud that we chose. But say you want to use a DevOps tool or deploy it on premise or a different environment, I'll just download the parameters and the KPI. I'll grab this script and that'll just deploy it for me with all that information, and it'll just run. You do have to install the CDP command line interface, which is a nice tool to deploy to the cloud, but we're not going to do that. It did all the parameters, updated that JDBC, and is now sending requests to the Kubernetes environment. The deployment's been initiated for this poorly named item here, and it's going to show us if there's any alerts, but this is pretty straightforward. Not much more to that. I mean, we're deploying stuff. It's pretty easy. This other one, we were doing NFTs to Pulsar. So again, I'm doing a REST call to get them, doing some funky cleanup of the records. And here I could send them to Pulsar. You can see I could also send them to Kafka or somewhere else. This is the cool thing. If a cluster happens to be down, I could just decide to send it somewhere else. Maybe I'm going to send it to JMS. Maybe I'll just send it to blob storage. We could just do blob storage. And instead of here, send it over here. Now it's blob storage. You tell me, oh, we don't have the budget for that. Okay, send it back to Pulsar. Or I could just leave it there. These are size configurable. I can make these huge and have them wait until I figure out, where am I going to send it. Probably want to send it right away, kind of the point of streaming, do it quickly. So this is still deploying on top of Kubernetes. We could see it provisioned a cluster. The deployment started. We don't have any metrics yet because it's started up one node. Now it has to send that NiFi on there, start it up appropriately with all the parameters applied, and then, do what it has to do out there. Pretty straightforward. But again, able to push to Pulsar right out of the box. I can connect to Stream Native, or I can connect to my own on-premise cluster if I've got some kind of gateway, which I actually do here, and that's how we're getting through that weird IP. But it's depends on how you want to do it. I have a couple minutes left here, so I'm going to leave that open for questions. As you can see, our deployment is successful. Putting that flow in there, you can see some of the metrics are already starting to show up. And I'll show you a feature which is really cool. I can manage this deployment right from here if I need to change the settings, but I can also, if I need to stop it, if I need to update the NiFi version, I could do that. I could also peek into the environment because I'm an administrator and I have access, and I could take a look at the deployed flow that's on this Kubernetes cluster and see that it is successfully publishing to Pulsar. That's awesome. Thank you. Please stay by for questions. We'll be answering them. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.